Hi, everybody. This is Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week, you can't see because it's not a video medium, but I am blushing. I have a guest that I'm a huge fan of. His name is Jenks Farmer, and he runs a very successful blog on Substack, which will be in the notes, and I would love for you guys to check it out and support him. In his own words, he's a Renaissance plantsman. He fell for plant sciences at Clemson University, for botanical garden design at the University of Washington, and for the natural world during an early education from a family of artists, musicians, and farmers. For 20 years now, he's led teams to plant and establish the vision for two of South Carolina's major botanical gardens, the Riverbanks Botanical Garden and Moore Farms. He's allowed visitors to come there, so if you get to know him through the Substack, you can coordinate that. I don't live anywhere near South Carolina, but someday I will be going there. And in addition to all this, just in case you already don't think he's awesome, he's also written multiple books, also which you can find on his site, and he lives with his husband and family on an 18th century South Carolina farm, now the site of a pioneering mail-order nursery specializing in organically grown plants of the genus Crinum. I hope I pronounced that right. Once again, I will encourage you to go visit his site, but we will get to this and much more on today's podcast. So with no further delays, welcome, Jenks. How are you doing?
Thanks, Mike. I'm doing great. I have been growing. I've been outside all day today. It's like 100 degrees here and 90% humidity. So I'm really happy to come inside for a little while and talk with you and think about death.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing to cool you off like a good conversation about death. Yeah, it's funny.
Right.
People think that Phoenix is the epicenter of hell with regards to heat, but I would argue that anything over 50% humidity is so much worse than anything we get here. So I don't know. That's my take. But so my condolences to your weather, but also, and I guess this is kind of a good first question. Is that weather like the best weather for farming and planting since you've lived in Washington and other states?
It depends on what you're farming and planting. This weather and this soil in this part of the country is basically why Europeans settled here, because it's an awesome growing. You can grow rice, corn, cotton, indigo. Those were our founding crops, and they just work in our climate, and they need that long season, and they need that humidity.
Yeah.
But of course, all the things that when I lived up in Seattle, it was like conifers, Douglas fir trees, and all kind of little bushes and beautiful things from New Zealand that we could never grow here. So the answer to your question is it all depends on what plant you want to grow.
And this is kind of a weird question, but I think it's kind of fun. If like a plane crashes, I like to try to think of people and their mindsets and occupations as like how quickly they would be asked for help and how important they would be in the hierarchy of who you start eating, a la like the book Alive. So in said situation, because of your knowledge of farming and planting, are you like pretty crucial to like start a new society? Like, would you be kind of okay in that like post-apocalyptic scenario?
Wow, that's interesting because I've done a lot of that. Working with a lot of what back in the day they were called the life after the oil crash people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was even interviewed in Forbes one time for helping a bunch of these super rich people produce and lay out these estates that would be self-sustaining. And one of these guys told me one time, "We're going to take care of you." Like, okay, thanks, buddy, because I don't know how to shoot a gun or anything.
That's awesome. So yes.
So I think so. Yeah, the answer is my knowledge can be pretty important to survival in certain climates.
Yeah, that's so cool because I'm a writer mainly, so I picture myself being eaten pretty quickly in that situation. I would just try to like appeal to people's sense of morality with my great oration skills and pray for the best. Cool. And I'm just curious also just socio-culturally, I have spent a lot of time in Seattle because I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm from like the Berkeley, California area, so I'm used to like super liberal culture, and I have like almost no experiential experience with like South Carolina and like what we call in that place the Deep South. I did live in like the Midwest and stuff, so I'm just curious, how would you compare the cultures of South Carolina and Seattle?
Well, when I was 18, I ran away. A little creative gay boy in South Carolina runs away as fast as they can and
Makes sense.
vows never ever to come back. But you learn, and I did come back. I came back for professional reasons with the full intention of going back to Seattle, but that just never happened. There's a liberal crowd all around us, even on our little farm way out here. You make connections pretty quick, and you kind of learn to read people. And then the guy down the road with giant flags and things in his front yard, I grew up with him. We're if my mom had a problem or if we had a problem, he would be right here to help. So you make peace in those sorts of ways with certain kinds of people, I guess, that you think, we're just not going to talk about stuff. We cancel each other's votes out. And sometimes we talk about it, but we know we're not going to change each other. And then on the other hand, there are days where you just think, I don't even want to talk to these people driving by me, surrounding me. I think we put out pretty clear messages on our little farm. When we invite people here, I'd say, my husband and I would like for you to come. We have a mixed race family, so like very clear in my writing and photos. It's like, this is what I believe. And if you're not cool with that, then just please don't come.
Yeah, you're touching on part of your appeal to me, which is coming from like the epicenter of liberalism. I actually can tend to get more annoyed by like pushy liberals, if you will, than like what you just described. But it's only because of what I was surrounded by and what I was used to. But with that said, what I love about your blog, and one of the reasons I want to help promote you and I really like what you do in life, is that I feel like the best form of like civil rights activism and the best form of activism in general is exactly what you're practicing, which is what you just described, but also what you're doing. So I'm curious, like, how much of your process, if you will, how much of like your mind is waking up every day and thinking, I'm not just a farmer, I'm not just doing these gardens, I'm not this and that, I'm like really an activist? Or is that like really rarely on your mind?
I don't know that I think about it every day, but it's definitely intentional in all kind of ways. And when I do presentations, they're about gardening, but the last time I did a presentation to this real like fancy smancy golf club, I got booed. Wow. I guess I got, well, not exactly booed. They weren't rude, but somebody said, "You've taken your time that we've invited you to talk about gardening to push your liberal agenda."
Oh, I remember reading about this actually. Yeah. Please keep going. Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. Why? Because I told you that we need to include African American heritage and plants. I couldn't get her to say anything else. So it is very intentional in my writing and in my presentations. Honestly, I guess in a day-to-day life, because we have lots of college students, we have lots of country boys that probably never met a gay couple. And when they come for interviews, I make it real clear, like, this is who I am. I'm your daddy's buddy, and this is my husband. And you're going to be cool with that, because that's how you need to be in order to live in this world. And one of them told me one time, one of the young country boys said one time, "Y'all are the coolest gay people I know." I was like, "Son, we're the only gay people you know."
It's funny, actually, I was going to switch topics because you brought up writing, and I really want to also hear about your process. But really quick on this one note, just because it's something I grew up thinking, and you're doing it like in your bio, you said that you actually go out of your way to do it. I always thought it was weird when in the 90s they started encouraging us to refer to the people we were dating as our partner. And the idea was that like if everyone says partner, then it's not an issue what your sexual orientation is. But I always thought that was like weirdly disingenuous to helping to normalize what should be normal. So you do say husband. I'm curious, like, do you ever feel pressure to say partner, or do you have any opinion on that like thing? And again, I'm just asking these questions because like philosophically I'm interested. So I don't expect you to be a mouthpiece for all of like gay culture or anything like that.
No, I can only speak for myself personally. I never liked the partner word. I had a gay uncle, so I grew up with my uncle and his lover. That was how he referred to him. And I think that's awesome. Because it describes what they were. And but I was never comfortable using that. So I have always used boyfriend, or then when husband came around, I got to use it. I don't really love the whole husband sort of marriage thing because it still excludes people who aren't there. Who are in long-term relationships with people they love, but do they feel weird saying husband because it's not a legal term?
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. I definitely share those thoughts. And like I said, I do want to get into your writing, and then I obviously want to get into philosophy. But I think getting these two subjects thoroughly talked about will help people to understand your moral philosophy and your spiritual metaphysical philosophy. So, have you always been a writer? I mean, you're like, first of all, let me just announce to my audience, because I know you're like a very, you're not a braggart. You have a way with words that is incredible. And I want to be specific because I went to an MFA program and I teach writing professionally. Something you can do that is truly rare is you can articulate a visual like sense to the reader, but also provide like an intellectual and conceptual component to it. So you have like a way of like very few words to describe something beautiful, but then you're also speaking about metaphors and other levels. And whether or not you do that consciously or not, that's definitely one of the reasons I love your writing. So I'm curious, was this an innate skill? Did you also study this at Clemson?
No, I think to answer your question is most of what you just said went right over my head.
Perfect. That's fine with me.
I was most definitely a C student in high school English. I took one modern American lit class because it was a requirement to go through Clemson. I was never thought of myself as a writer. I'm a horrible speller, but I did grow up in a rural South, or in a multi-generational farm. And my uncles and father and grandfathers, they were all big storytellers. So I try to pull on that in my writing. In the last couple of years, I've taken some online classes with there's a woman named Janice Ray who does environmental writing, and she's actually who got me on the Substack.
Oh, okay.
But that's the only writing that I have. I have lots of people in my life that critique and edit and bounce things. I can bounce things off of.
It's just incredible because I actually we have a lot in common. I was also a poor, my words, poor student, meaning C's, and I was not a big fan of English. I remember being given like one book my senior year that like I read in like a day, and it kind of changed my life, and that was the beginning of something for me. But similarly, I had no sense of grammar, no sense of like writing ability, and then in college I just kind of started emulating. But what my compliment, just to be clear, was that you an economy of words is what they call it in writing school, but it's like the Hemingway approach to writing, which even if people want to lambast him for his personal traits and character, he is still like, an icon and legendary in the writing world for doing what I'm essentially saying you do, which is to write with fewer words than most to express things. And so I think a different way to ask, not the exact same question, but would be like, when you're in nature and you're seeing it, are you like photographing it and then replicating it with words, or is this just like you sit down and these things just flow out of you?
I don't write inside. I write at my office. When I'm in nature, am I photographing it with my mind? No, it's like a whole body feeling. I definitely have that, and I definitely pay attention to all kind of little details because they fascinate me, but also because they will lead to success or failure of the kind of gardening that I'm doing. Yeah, just when I sit down to write, that experience kind of just comes out.
Cool. This is like flow state, like when you're in the flow, which could be anything from like Michael Jordan playing basketball to you writing. It kind of ties into like the next segment of this podcast, which would be metaphysics. First, let's just start off with some basic questions. Were you raised with any religion, and are you practicing any religion now? Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
So I was raised with way too many religions. I was Episcopalian in a small country community, and that didn't have an Episcopal real community. So I went to Catholic school because that was the nearest school, and it was an awesome education. I gotta say.
Cool.
And while the Catholics were doing Catholic things, the rest of us like played backgammon. And,
That's awesome.
yeah. One way that had a profound influence is that this was in the early 70s and race was still an issue here. And in that school, race was not an
Awesome.
issue. Those sisters did not put up with those kind of distinctions. I didn't realize how important that was till later.
That's phenomenal.
Then, yeah, it was awesome. Then I was kind of bad, and I got moved to Baptist high school, which was a real shock. And by the time I graduated from high school, I was like, all these people, they're like all kind of saying the same thing, but they're at the same time, they're pointing fingers and saying, he's saying it wrong. And I just lost respect for organized religion. I didn't lose the desire for it, and I still have that to some degree, I guess, but I'm not in any way involved in any organized religion now. I kind of miss some of the ritual of it, but it's been years since I participated on a regular basis.
It's so fascinating to talk to anyone from your culture, and what I mean by that is literally South Carolina, just because, like, I barely know what baptism is. To me, it's like a scene in a movie. They like the Coen brothers dunk someone's head in and they make a joke or something. And then like, I'm also from like Berkeley, and my parents like raised me to meditate without like much religion or anything. So I like never got to like go to services, and I was always jealous of my friends like for getting to go to church and stuff. So it's interesting because when I hear stories like yours, it just like my mind gets like sort of jealous, and then also sort of like, oh, well, thank God my parents like helped me steer clear of that. But when you talk about like the desire for it and stuff, do you have a desire for like to understand like the purpose and meaning of life and things like that? Or do you just have a desire for the community that religion represents and brings?
No, I enjoyed the community, I think. And even once as an adult, I worked down in Haiti at an agricultural school that was primarily funded by an Episcopal group, and I really liked the community, and I think especially in South Carolina, and the Haiti South Carolina connection is pretty strong. So there were a lot of people there who knew grandparents and that sort of thing. It was really more just personal community.
Got it. So I guess drum roll, it's time for the big question, which is, as a recovering Episcopalian who went to a Catholic school and then tossed out into the Baptist school for bad behavior, where do you stand now? What do you think is going to actually happen to you when you die?
I've thought a lot about this since you've asked me, because it's not something I think about a lot. I'm a biologist, and I'm around death constantly, like of plants. I'm a farmer of death of animals. I think, as I told you, I grew up on a multi-generational farm. I lived through AIDS. I think I've just been around a lot of death. So I want to think that there's some unity. I don't know what that is, but some place where there's a unified energy for I don't know how to put that into words so much. But as a scientist, I think we decompose.
Yeah.
And, and we become part of Earth again, and then become something else in that way.
Is it possible in your worldview that there's two energies in us, the body and then this like consciousness thing, and that maybe the science answer totally does apply to the body, but like the thing inside of Jenks, the thing that like perceives the world, lives on? And I'm asking, I'm not trying to force this on you.
Yeah, and I would like to think
Mhm.
that. I think that yeah, of course, I think it's possible, and of course, I was raised with religion and spirituality, and I have never totally rejected that. And I think when I say there's this sort of maybe there's this sort of unified place, that it's where that spiritual part.
Oh, that's cool. Have you ever had a like spiritual experience here on Earth? And if you've had many, can you pick like one? Is there a peak one?
So I guess this counts as a spiritual experience. Because as a scientist, I can't explain how this happened, but I was in college and I woke up one night, just crying, and I had a very vivid dream of a woman who came to visit me, and this woman had earrings that looked like the roots of trees. She had all kind of little things in her pockets that told me that she knew me in my childhood and my upbringing. In the dream, she shows me those things, and then she walks away into this sort of field. And 2 weeks later, I went to see my grandmother and ask her about the woman who cared for us when we were little, in the summertime when our parents were working. We had a bunch of cousins had the same caretaker. And she said she died 2 weeks ago. And I started looking, I looked her up, looked up her death date was exactly the night that I had woken up with that profound sadness.
Wow. Wow.
So, I mean, I think that's a spiritual.
Well, let's unpack it a little bit. Was there any aftermath to that? Did it do anything for you? Were you like, did it? I mean, if you remember it now, many years later, it obviously affected you. So how did it affect you?
Maybe it's made me a little bit more consider death a little bit more. That was also during the early days of age.
Okay.
Um, at a time when I was losing lots of friends, it maybe gave me the hope that I mentioned earlier, that there is that place somewhere beyond where we reconnect. Whether we say, hey, Mike, it's good to see you. I don't, that's not the kind of connection I'm talking about. But maybe that dream today is a reminder that there's something beyond this physical world.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And I love that you looked it up and it's on the exact date. I mean, I'm collecting these stories as I do this podcast, and it's just really cool. It's also interesting. One of the reasons I started this podcast was just to like talk about death with people, because I used to do hospice and I found too many people who don't talk about it. But it's kind of evolved into this thing where like I'm starting to believe more and more in the supernatural and the spiritual because of my guests, because like you're not a liar and you're not a braggart and you're not the kind of person who would just like walk into a room and be like, me, let me tell you about this ghost story. So I have to like pull things out of you, which is true with most authors I interview. Authors like to write. They don't love to talk, it seems. But so it's cool because I'm taking a lot from that. And then I am kind of curious. We touched and danced on so many different subjects, but one of the reasons I consider you like a teacher to me, like, because in my life I just feel like a student and I'm learning from others, is that you have a sense of compassion for what, like in philosophy they call the other, which is like a person who's not like you, a person who you're never going to be like. And this idea is that like, you're not supposed to do that, and yet we all do it. And so I'm curious, do you have advice for people in my audience who maybe are like you but younger, and they haven't like accepted that there's like hate out there, and that there's people who like you said, like I have this neighbor who would help me in need, but we're not going to agree on politics. Our votes are going to cancel each other out. So like in this tumultuous time, do you have any advice for people who have anger in that period instead of what you have, which is a compassionate understanding?
So it's hard for me to give advice to that, because sometimes that everybody needs to live through that anger.
Cool. Yeah.
Sometimes that anger is what moves things, right? That anger is what moved the ACT UP movement to do, so that anything was ever done with HIV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. It was angry. And I think that one piece of advice is sometimes you got to embrace that and jump into it. And I still have little bits of that anger. And when it's time, I'm not afraid to use it. But in other places, it can't drag your life down completely. And you can learn so much about yourself and your friends. But like as a writer, I kind of like to interview people that are way different from me. I guess maybe I learn what I don't want to be.
Yeah.
And then I also realize that by doing that, sometimes you make that connection, and you just hope that they've gotten a little bit of something from you that's valuable. It may not have changed their vote. It may not have changed how they feel about transgender bathrooms, but it might have imparted a little bit of compassion, so that when they're making a decision, they're at least thinking about you or somebody like that they know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that was a great answer. And I do obviously when I ask a question, I'm mainly asking for myself, because I just still, like, we brought up a multiracial family. So I have a son who's half Asian, and like many, many, many people who meet me don't know that. And so sometimes I'll hear someone make a comment about an Asian, and it will like raise my temper way past a rational level, that if someone made the exact same comment about an African American, of which I'm equally supportive of, and I have many friends who are African American, it raises my anger, but not to that level. And so I know I'm taking it like extra personally, and I sometimes like wonder how to deal with that. And so your answer helped me, because I feel like some of that anger is still necessary. And the reason I also asked it, and I still want to like ask you one other question about this, is there's so many people right now giving up on America and saying, forget it, let's just like have a civil war, let's break up, let's like end this. And because you've been bi-coastal, you've lived in South Carolina and Seattle, I have a strong feeling that you disagree with that sentiment, as I do, which is that no, this nation's great and the diversity can help us. So maybe could you give like a pitch? I know this is weird, but for people who have never experienced conservatism or the South and like the vibe that's down there, can you give like a pitch in its defense? Because I'm sure you're also a fan of it.
Well, I'll present myself as a pitch. I mean, I'm a product of it. I'm a product of it, and so is my Japanese husband is also a product of it. You know, he grew up on a military base, so yeah, there's the pitch. There's lots of good that comes out of it. There are people who see beyond it, and I'll tell you, even at a young age, and I've like tried to figure this out. Like, how did I know that what I heard people saying, I think about race, was wrong? Right? And how did I know that at such a young age? There wasn't. I guess there were some nuns around me, but it wasn't very explicit. So I think that you have products of those of anywhere in anything that are beautiful people that want to, you know, cross pollinate, for a terrible
I love it.
terrible pun on my field, but you learn so much. I learned so much from those people, my great aunts and uncles who laughed all the time and taught me to tell stories and to use words and to entertain people, which is a skill that I hope I've turned into teaching. But you know, there are people who would be appalled that I'm a gay married man living on this same farm. Even here, where it's still incredibly conservative, it's changed drastically. And I have young people that I get to influence, 20-year-olds who are working with me, who may not have that exposure, but are, you know, getting ready to go off to college and go across the country, and they have a lot of conservative values that they grew up with, but they also have that little bit of understanding and compassion and looking beyond. And I just think those are things that you learn to build on and sometimes to reject. But the idea that you could have one place that's completely unified, and especially in this country, and it's say a liberal philosophy is, I don't think that's very realistic.
Yeah. Amen.
We're not Denmark, and Denmark's not Denmark anymore either, right?
Yeah.
Like the unity of even Scandinavian countries is changing drastically.
That's a brilliant point. I have never heard anyone say it that way, and I totally agree. And forgive my Generation X slang, but you're an awesome dude, Jenks. I'm really glad I got to formally meet you on the air. And to everyone listening at home, thank you again. The best way to support the show is to head over to MikeyOpp.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com. And just click the subscribe button. It's free, and if you feel like going the extra mile, please sign up for a premium subscription. It helps support everything we do, and it also helps support people who want to receive this for free. So it's a great deal. And also, I would be remiss if I did not encourage you to head over to Jenks' blog. It will be in the notes, and if you follow me online, you'll be able to find the link there as well. Thank you, everyone, for listening. My name is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening to Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon.